see, externalities, we'll finish, I think, did we finish public goods?
Yeah, slide 8 we left off.
Okay, we didn't do it all then. Then we got externalities, and then income distribution. Probably will still need a little bit of Wednesday to finish all of it. And again, I'll put the review sheet up for the final exam that will be, did I say next Monday? At 8, not 7:30. I think the original time, or official time, is 7:30 to 9:30. But we'll come in at 8, normal class time. Let's see what else. Externalities. I think there's quite a few slides there for the income distribution, but it goes fairly quickly. I'm just going to open everything up here. Turn on. All right, this slide that I'm pulling up is where we left off. And this actually got the information, it came from information out of your book, chapter 16. And it had to do with categories of legislation based on the distribution of costs and benefits. And there's a table. I think the table is actually that one in your book, but it's got the pictures. I didn't put the pictures up here, but it's got, that is the table. But the description of it actually starts back 2 slides. The distribution, when legislators get involved in terms of providing public goods, they try to figure out what is going to, I guess, meet the masses, what might be more beneficial to more people than very few. Sometimes legislators do like to maybe there's some small project they want to get approved, and it would be one of those pork belly or pork barrel spending that is not necessarily good for but a few people. Widespread benefits, widespread cost. So you get big, just think about the words, widespread benefits to everybody, but everybody gets to pay too, the widespread cost of it. This is traditional public goods legislation, it's positive impact. I don't know why it's not moving here. The total benefits typically exceed the total cost. I think that's one of the categories there. It talks about national defense as being an example of that. Concentrated benefits, that's again a small group of people being spread out across everyone. This is more special interest legislation. It harms the economy. Typically the costs are greater than the benefits. This is the example I said, pork barrel spending, the fat that we necessarily don't need. And I think the example there was farm subsidies, concentrated benefits, yeah. That's their example. Another part of the matrix is widespread benefits. Again, everybody gets the good part of it. Concentrated costs, only a small number of people pay for it. It's more of a populist legislation, a small group of individuals who are supporting it. Beneficiaries, rationally ignorant. An example there was tort defense, tort reform. I say not good here, small print. Widespread benefits, again, concentrated cost. Tort reform, which is a legal term, civil matters. And then the last one, concentrated benefits, concentrated cost. This is competing in interest legislation or the political wranglings that go on. You have fierce political battles. Their example is labor union issues. where you'll see definitely severe differences of opinion there. And that's the picture there of the matrix that's in the book. I think in the fall I gave 1 or 2 questions referring to these categories. This was not in another book that I had, so this is something new. Just dealing with public goods. And that was the last slide. Okay. All right, real quick, we're going to do the other group of slides called externalities. I'll see on that last one here. Externalities is kind of a extension of the lost my train of thought. Externality, an extension of negative side effects. Well, it's what it's really referred to as. And the common resources, that's what I was thinking of. Common resources, sometimes common resources, we like the Gulf, we overfish it. And there's the tragedy of the commons. And that kind of is a related issue when there's externalities involved. But the word externality essentially is another phrase for the effects that occur to someone else, whether they're good or bad. Some of them are good, they're not all bad. So the good ones could be things like college education. And what an externality is, it's a side effect. It's a spillover effect to a third party. Most of the time we think of bad ones, but there are some good ones too. So the definition there is the benefit or cost that affects someone who is not directly involved in the production or consumption of a good or service. Let's look at some of the effects of externalities. The first, anytime you see the word cost, it typically is meaning a bad effect, a bad side effect. So I'll say bad side effect. And if it's generally saying something that's benefit, it's a good side effect or a good spillover. There is a small clip here under the there's the movie Aaron Brockovich, which there was pollution, and it's typically one of the bad examples there, it's the most common. But when you think of cost, the private cost is the cost borne by the producer of the good or service. So if you're producing orange juice at Tropicana, they are certainly paying for the production of that. All the machinery, the labor, the getting the oranges, transportation to the manufacturing plant, it's a cost that they are paying for. It's borne by them. The social cost is the cost of producing the good plus any external cost. So by producing orange juice, whatever it takes to make orange juice over Tropicana, that's the private cost. But then there could also be some external cost because we pollute the air. You smell it when they, start this, the production process. You kind of can get the smell of orange juice being produced. And that might be an external cost to the surrounding communities, to the Braden area. It could be harmful to your health. It could be harmful to maybe making your clothes dirtier, your car, all that kind of negative side effect. Well, sometimes the government steps in and says, okay, well, because you're polluting the air around you, we're going to make you pay for it. And they fine companies. So that's a cost. So they got to include that cost with the private cost. And we call that the entire amount of social cost. Everybody's, or the social cost of having to pay for the pollution and the cleanup. The benefits, the good ones, typically the benefits are received by the consumer of the good. Like I said earlier, college education, that is generally a benefit to society. As people are more educated, more people are going to college, earning a college degree, and so we have a more educated workforce. We have people who can write a sentence. most of the time. I'm a teacher. I'm very, and I know you guys in your generation, you type, you text, I don't know if you speak as much like this, but you type and text in shorthand, or whatever you want to call it, emoticons, and letters that represent words, like the letter U for the word you, Y-O-U. That's okay, I guess, in texting language. But when you're writing me, I don't like it. I don't like non-capitalized first words. I want the first word capitalized. Again, I'm a teacher. I just think like that. Your friends, they don't care, because that's just part of what you do. So going back to the fact that I think you have a college education, I think you can structure a sentence. I used to kid my daughters many years ago. They started to say the word like when they were in their early teen. You know how like this, like that, like. Everything was like. I said, can you structure a sentence without the word like? They couldn't do it. I mean, literally, they could not say anything without saying the word like. That was like when they were 13 or so. But maybe you had that little habit for a while, too. But the benefits of a college education is good to society. We have a more educated society. Social benefit, total benefit of consuming the good, that's the private benefit to you. I kind of said this already, the answer. The private benefit's your education. You earned the college degree, and now you're more educated. But because you're more educated and everyone else is, it's an external benefit to society. We got a smarter society. All right, so that's the good ones. And there's some examples here, some other ones. I think I put texting as one, as a negative one. It's a newer one there, yeah. Talking and texting while driving. So these external costs, these are the negative externalities, are the bad side effects, the bad externalities. It's the act of producing or consuming goods by individual firms that sometimes generates or imposes costs to others that are not paid to endure them. Most of them are pollution, exhaust from automobiles. What did the government do many years ago? About 50, 60 years ago, cars did emit a lot of harmful fumes into the air with their exhaust. But now they've regulated the auto manufacturer to include, or to now put mufflers and abatement type of equipment on cars to reduce the amount of pollutants into the air. I mean, even diesel cars aren't as bad as they used to be. I think the diesel itself is cleaner, but the fuel. But I think the cars now, I remember diesels back in the 50s and 60s. They're, I mean, like a truck. You think of an 18-wheel truck. It's just noisy, loud, and dirty. And that's the way cars work. But now diesels, really, they're not too bad as far as the pollution effects. Cigarette smoking, you know, that has been changed over the years. When I worked in 1985 at IBM, I didn't work there very long, but I did work there for a while in their corporate office. At the time, you could smoke in the office. I did not smoke, but many people did. And it was just an awful experience. We sat in cubicles, and a lady across from me smoked the harshest cigarette known to women, I think, and it was just not good. I think I had bronchitis for a year. When I moved back to Florida, it took me a while to clear everything from that. And what did the government do not too long after that? Really, I think it happened not long after that. Now no one can smoke indoors. You got designated areas. This campus is a smoke-free campus. I know people that do it. They go across the way over here. They go under trees. You go in your car, or whatever. You know, the enforceability of that is something I question when we first put it in effect. All public schools are smoke-free zones, although there are parents who will sneak a cigarette somewhere behind the football stadium or whatever. Anyhow, what about restaurants? In Florida, right, there's no smoking, but in some states, it's okay, or there's designated areas, there's non-smoking and smoking. To me, I don't think there's a big difference, but It used to be that way in Florida until they changed it. Talking and texting, of course, there's a law now to reduce the texting while driving. But I don't think the law has a lot of force behind it. People, I think, do they have to catch you doing something else
Yeah,
first?
they have to catch you if you like don't use your blinker. If you go over the lines, they can pull you over, but if you're just texting, they can't pull you over.
Right. And it's okay if you're stopped at a red light, correct?
As long as you're not in motion. You're
Not
not
in motion, yeah. Well, so I don't know. I know some states may have a little bit harsher
Yeah,
laws.
they do. And New York,
penalties.
you can't. New York, you can't.
New York, it's not, yeah.
In Georgia, you
In-
can't even talk on the phone.
Yeah, you can't.
In Georgia, yeah, my daughter lives there, and
Yeah, I drove through that
Does
all the
it?
time. My dad got pulled over. It was hilarious.
yeah. I tell her too the same thing. Of course, she now has a car that's got the Bluetooth speak, but the texting still, that's, you know, you're probably very good at recognizing, and the cops are trained. Somebody driving along, their head goes this way, head goes that way. What are they looking at down there? Their phone. They're not looking.
Just trying to see the brake or the gas.
Yeah, you're looking at, I mean, when your head moves down, they can tell that you're looking at something else. I don't like to drive around people who are texting,
Right, they got
around them. I mean, you're less, your attention is not as focused. I don't want you running in the back of me because you're doing this and all of a sudden you look up and I'm right there. What's your first reaction on your brakes? I want to know this. This is general, this is just something aside. I ask my daughters this all the time. What's your first reaction when you have to slam on the brakes pretty quick? My first reaction is look in the rearview mirror. I always look back because you don't know what's behind you, and they're not going to see you hit the brakes quickly. So always look up, and then you got to be able to move left or right. Now you may not have time to; you might have to take it. But I've always told my daughters, you have to slam on the brake quick. Look up in the rearview mirror, see what's coming, because you're going to get smoked probably. All right, there's your driving tip for the day. Here's Erin. Erin Brockovich, Julia Roberts.
I don't need to be a pain.
I don't remember her name. But, if you remember the movie, this is the name of the movie, Erin Brockovich. And the gal, she helped. I think she still kind of does this, right? I'm not sure exactly but there's pollution in the area, and it's harmful to the family and kids. And this company is kind of trying to get out of paying their social cost, their external cost of the polluting the air. It's I forgot what you'll hear it on here. Something that causes some carcinogens, cancer. The other thing too is notice one of the actors at the very end. It was one of his first roles. He plays on Bones. I don't know if you remember the movie, but
Especially after all they done for Hinkley, but
They want this place, they're gonna have to pay for it. So you didn't put the house up for sale, they just came to you and wanted to buy it. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, I don't wanna move. Up with the kids, got a couple of girls. I was thinking, I don't know if I have the energy. You know, I've considered, me and Pete both have. So the whole idea of selling this house, Oh, Bill.
This is the chromium. The chromium. Well, let's kick this whole thing off.
What kind of chromium is it?
There's one you want to touch?
Yes, there's straight up chromium, does all kinds of good things for the body. There's chrome 3, which is fairly benign. And then there's chrome 6, hexavalent chromium, which, depending on the amounts, can be very harmful.
Harmful, how, but what would you get?
Repeated exposure to toxic levels, God, anything really, from chronic headaches and nosebleeds to respiratory disease, liver failure, heart failure, reproductive failure, bone or organ deterioration, plus, of course, any type of cancer.
So, that stuff, it kills people.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Highly toxic, highly carcinogenic. It gets into your DNA too, so you can pass it trouble along with your kids. It's very, very bad.
Well, what's it used for?
Rust, I think. See, the utility plants use these piston engines to compress the gas. The engines get hot, you gotta run water through them. Chromium's in the water to prevent corrosion.
Well, how do I find out what kind of chromium they use in Hinkley?
The water.
What's that?
Every country has one. They keep records of anything water related within their jurisdiction. You should be able to find something there.
County Water Board. All right, well, thanks.
And good luck. I wouldn't advertise what you're looking for if I were you. Incriminating records of the way you disappear and people's don't track.
I'll remember that.
That means that it's right on the PG property. And you say that this stuff, this hexavalent chromium, oh, it's poisonous. Well, Aaron, it's just gotta be different than what's in our water, cause ours is okay. The guys from PG&E told me, they sat right in the kitchen and told me that it was fine.
I know, but toxicologist that I've been talking to, he gave me a list of problems that can come from hexavalent chromium exposure. Everything you all have sometimes.
No. No, that's not what our doctor said. He said that, well, that one's got absolutely nothing to do with the other. The PG&E paper.
Ashley! Oh! We got so much right.
The minute when the sent that fax saying the second she pressed the send button, PG&E's claim department was on the phone to me, scheduling a meeting.
So you think that, so governments, so you think it's,
Well, I take the trouble to send someone, sure as hell, sounds like they're setting up and taking notes. Mr. Floyd, in terms of medical expenses, $250,000 isn't gonna come close to what this family's gonna have to spend on doctors.
I understand they've had a bad run of luck, health-wise, and they have my sympathies, but that's not PG&E's fault.
Okay. Look at these readings. PG&E's own technicians documented toxic levels hexavalent foaming in those wells on numerous occasions. Everything the Genesis have had was proven reaction to exposure to hexavalent foaming. They have had.
Breast cysts, uterine cancer, Hodgkin's disease, immune deficiencies, asthma, chronic nosebleed.
A million things could have caused those problems. Poor diet, bad genes, irresponsible lifestyle. Our offer is final, and it's more than fair.
Wait a minute. I thought we were negotiating.
$250,000 is all I'm authorized to offer.
Now present your offer to my clients. I doubt that accept.
Mr. Mansory, before you go off on some crusade, you might want to remember who it is you're dealing with here. PG&E is a $28 billion corporation.
$28 billion? I didn't know it was that much. Wow! 28 billion.
Nelson.
Okay.
Yeah, remember him? I mean, no, him from Bones, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
When I saw that, it was just 1999 or somewhere around there, I think that movie was made. It's been a while. Yeah, it's a series, yeah. All right, here's a graph of the externality pollution, the bad one. And just this is just a supply and demand curve. These I typically have seen. There's the equilibrium in the middle. What happens when the cost of external pollution occurs and the company has to clean it up? Their supply curve shifts back to the left. It looks like it's going up, but it's left. A decrease in supply because it's extra money they got to pay to clean up the pollution, or things they've got to do to fix their smokestacks, whatever it is, to keep the pollution levels down. It's just an additional cost to the company, which causes the price to rise a little bit. The benefits, these are the good ones. I mentioned college education. Here's some other examples. Immunizations. Again, these are things that are good side effects, benefits to others, do not have to pay for them. Restoring historic buildings through tax breaks. Developers might get a tax break to go down and redo the downtown areas. That's a benefit to the downtown community in the area, and that's a positive impact on the community. Immunizations and shots when you're a child or a baby are positive for society as a whole, so that we do not have the infectious diseases such as measles, mumps, rubella spreading rapidly. I think I saw somewhere last week where there's an outbreak of mumps at Ohio State, like 18 people or so. I don't know if they got it contained, but don't go off and get paranoid. But I think it was Ohio State. But those are all positive things. If we didn't have those kinds of things, of course, now you're hearing people who would rather not give their child immunization shots. I think Jenny McCarthy said something that she wasn't supportive of it. But I don't know. It's a positive impact. I mean, yeah, there are probably some research about the shots and the harmful effects, but then I don't know what percentage of, what probabilities of those are as far as the side effects. But immunizations are good for society so that we're not a sick society. As a matter of fact, the government helps in this regard by providing shots. Even if it's just a flu shot, you'll see them set up these mobile units and they're providing them for a very nominal fee, maybe free. Sometimes it's free flu shots. Or maybe for $5 you get all your child's immunizations updated. The $5 is nothing more than an administrative fee, paper, to pay for that. But typically the government, that's the government, the health department, they're stepping in and providing this public good because they realize it's a good thing to society. Just as the government might step in and provide grants and federal loans, student loans, to those that want to go and attend college education. And so this is an example of college education where the government, again, here's equilibrium, where the demand, because it's a social benefit, good thing, yeah, benefit here, good side effect, the demand for college education shifts to the right, which causes the price to go up, but then the government steps in and provides subsidies, whether it's a grant, whether it's a Stafford loan, whatever it might be. And that's good for society, although individually now you owe money for the rest of your life with a student loan. People do have high debts of student loans, more than ever before. All right, what's the Coase theorem? The Coase theorem is a theory that was named after Ronald Coase, that he said that the government was not the only solution to an externality problem. Remember I said the government would step in if it's a bad side effect and fine the company. Okay, that's the government stepping in. They solve it. Or with a good one like college education or immunizations, they step in and provide monies. They throw money at it to help the good side effects. Well, it's not always the case the government can be the most efficient. But he received the Nobel Prize for this theory, and it's basically very simple. If private parties can bargain to their mutual advantage, and I want to maybe in quotes put this, as long as transaction costs are sufficiently low, then the private market will always solve the problem of externalities and allocate resources efficiently. If the costs are high, like if you got to get legal, you got to get attorney, legal representation, you got to get attorneys involved, well, forget it then. Attorneys are going to charge too much, the costs are going to be too prohibitive, and now the private parties can't solve the problem efficiently. But if the costs are low, like let's say you live next to your neighbor, I got a couple examples, your neighbor next door, you guys have a row of trees, okay, that make the properties, both properties, very valuable and beautify it. The row of trees are actually though on his property. So legally he could do what he wants with those trees. He could cut them down. Well, what if he comes over and says one day, I'm going to cut all my trees down. I'm tired of having to rake all the leaves and all the pine needles and all that kind of stuff. You say, oh no, you can't do that. Why would you want to do that? It's going to devalue our properties. That's what makes it. But again, they're on his property, so he has the right to do that. Well, what if you guys kind of, you're good neighbors. I mean, you're not, but you offer, hey, look, I'll give you money to help clean up the leaves, but leave the trees. Don't cut them down, because that's going to be a long run benefit to us. So they've solved it. I mean, they could kind of get together and make the decision. Obviously, it's going to cost one neighbor some money to do that in the short run, but it could be that's a more efficient solution. How about if you live in an apartment complex and your neighbor has a barking dog that keeps you up at night? Again, you're in close proximity to each other and you're hearing this dog all night long. Short of shooting the dog, what would be a good solution between the two parties?
For them to move?
For them to move. Of course, I think apartment complexes have noise ordinances, or at least some sort of thing when you sign your lease. If you have a pet ordinance, maybe even a county ordinance that does have something to do. Maybe there's a muzzle, something to put on the dog to help at night. I certainly wouldn't want to live next to it either. And that's an externality to you. It's a negative side effect on you that you just have to endure it. But you could go to your neighbor, of course it probably wouldn't be a nice conversation, and you could go, hey look, your dog keeps me up at night. You gotta do something to it. Again, short of shooting the dog. Could they work out something? Maybe not. Maybe in that example, they would have to get legal things involved, to kick them out, to evict them, and that's costly. It may not be so costly because it's probably written somewhere, they violated their lease, or a county ordinance, and it's pretty simple to evict the person because of that. But the Coase theorem says private parties should be able to allocate resources efficiently. And here's the definition of transactions cost. Basically, transactions cost, the cost of communication and the cost of legal binding agreements. Typically, legal services are expensive. The last slide here is about the two terms. I think these were actually at the beginning of the chapter. What are the differences between an exhaustible resource and a renewable resource? An exhaustible resource is where you have a fixed supply that can be exhausted, can be run out in the future. A renewable one is one that can regenerate itself, like with tree planting. You cut a tree down, you plant another one. So you kind of have a renewable resource there. It can be used indefinitely if there's conservative use. Okay, so that was just a couple definition terms. All right, let me move quickly here to, I want to start the income distribution chapter. There's 25 slides, but as I said earlier, they move fairly quickly. There's some numbers, statistical data. You don't have to necessarily remember the numbers. But this is chapter 18. The title is Income Distribution and Poverty. So I went ahead and just put it all under this. I call it Income Distribution, Inequality, and Poverty. And I've kind of edited a little bit of the slides from what I've had in the past. Here's a table of the income inequality. So the opposite of equality, inequality, distribution in the year 2008. Again, I don't want you to remember numbers. That's not that important to me. But general ideas of the percentages on the right might come to mind. How this is divided is by quintiles. And each quintile is a 20% group. Okay, so you have the lowest quintile, which might be the 20% here, another quintile, another one, and then the highest part here, quintile is right there, the top quintile. And the number there, income range, obviously will change from year to year. This is 2008. 2014, obviously the numbers are probably a little different. And they even got the average income. I'm sure that's different today. The percents, though, you'll see, I think I have another slide. The percents, though, the percents haven't really changed a whole lot. If this was an equal distribution, then you would see the percents be 20, 20, 20, 20, 20. But they're not. The total adds up, if you, not that part, if you added this up, you would get 100%. Okay, 50 plus 23 plus that plus this. That's 100%. This is just the top 5%. So you get 100%. So if you had an equal distribution, it'd be a 20, 20, 20, 20, 20. Well, if that was the case, we have an equal distribution of income throughout the United States. Would there be an incentive to go to med school, to go be a doctor, go to be CPA, if you know that you're going to make the same as pretty much everybody else? Or at least your percent is going to be an equal distribution. I think that lowers incentives somewhat, your rewards for wanting to better yourself. So again, here's the top 5%. It's like this extra last group. There's another 5% in here, and this is of the 20. And that's people over 180,000. That's 21% of the total income in the United States. Oh, 50% is the high quintile. Of all income in the United States, the top 20% of people own 50% of it. So that's kind of, it's more than $100,000 of income. This comes from the Census Bureau, and I got, again, that's kind of some old data, but at least it has some pattern to it. There's some changes, but some small changes. The mean household income is the average, the median is the one in the middle. Okay, and that's statistics. Here's a picture, I believe this was in your book. The share of the aggregate household income by quintile. There's let's see, lowest quintile, that's this group. The second quintile, that's this group. The third, the fourth, and the high. Okay, so if you look at the percentages, yeah, you know, what I have on my other slide, 3.4, okay, that was 2008. So this was 2009, so it's still 3.4. Now, from 1980, it was 4.3, but it's actually gone down. That's not good from an income inequality standpoint. This has gone down. What we'd like to see is this kind of rise a little bit, or at least what we like to see. I mean, as far as if you'd like to see some equality, 20%, lowest 20% of income earns 20% of all money in the United States. But they've all kind of fallen just a little over time since 1980, except for the rich. That's tended to rise. So what we typically say, that the rich get richer. And this is the top 5% of income here in that dark green category. Again, this is since 1980. Income in the United States is quite unequally distributed. The average income of the poorest fifth of families is less than the quarter of the average income of families in the middle. The richest fifth have an average income more than 3 times that of families in the middle. That would be, if you go back to that 3 times that average income. So if you go back to that first slide, average income is 171,000. Middle income is middle group is 50,000, so that's more than 3 times the income. The incomes of the richest fifth of the population are on average about 15 times as high as those of the poorest fifth. Measuring income. How do we measure it? After cash transfer payments are received. So that cash transfer payments might be things like Social Security checks, unemployment compensation. Those are government entitlement. Transfer payments are basically government monies that are being transferred from their coffers to your pocket, okay? Because you're in need of it, or you are qualifying for it, like Social Security. You're of age to receive it. And it's before taxes are paid, so it's a gross amount, not a net. And it's before any in-kind transfers are received, such as food vouchers, Medicare, Medicaid, public housing, or employer-provided benefits. Those are what are, I think I have another part of the definition of in-kind transfers in another slide. How has the distribution of income changed over time? Again, this takes those 20 percentiles. As we saw back in 2008, it was 3.4%. 2005, it was still 3.4%. And it's up to 50%. So, like I said, the percentages haven't changed a great deal. But 1% might be for the low percentile, is a big number in terms of millions of people. In 1936, which was during the Great Depression, 4.1%, still had 51% of the top over there. What happened, you do see a little bit of an increase from here to there, in the 60s. I make a point of that because in the 1960s, Lyndon Johnson took over for John F. Kennedy after he was assassinated, and he had, I think in his campaign in 64, one of his big campaign promises was to fight the war on poverty. And he spent, or he wanted, and they spent, they being Congress and the government, spent millions of dollars on improving aid toward the needy, people, those that are in poverty. And you can see the percent of the low distribution rose from 3.2 to 4.1 and even further in 1980. But then that started to slowly come back down over the years. I don't know, it would be interesting to see what it is today, 14. Sometimes income has a time dimension, mobility. People change from one year to the next. The income accounting period of a year is too short to be meaningful in judging income inequality. Over a period of time, though, it can have a lot more benefits to it. So the example I gave, I have one like this on the test. If Brad earns $1,000 in year one and $100,000 in year two, while Jenny earns $100,000 in year one and $1,000 in year two. Well, if you looked at these distributions here, Brad would be at the low in year one because he only earned $1,000. But in year two, he'd be over here at the high amount. Okay, so he's really moved all the way across in the quintiles. Whereas Jenny started over here, but then the next year she didn't do so well and is now back over here. So from year to year, it's very unequal, isn't it? Very unequal. But over a 2-year period, what is it? It's equal. I mean, if you took their average over the 2-year period, they both made the same amount of money. So be somewhere in the middle. So sometimes you can't just always take a person's single year income. It might be beneficial to take it over a period of years, a lifetime, because there's considerable churning of mobility. Sometimes you're here, the next year you make enough money, you go to that income bracket or quintile. The following year you don't do as well, maybe go back to this one. So there's kind of movements. The most income receivers start at a low level, peak during middle age, and then decline. General lifespans of earnings. Your earnings are going up, you kind of get to 40s and 50s, and you start to kind of max out your earnings, and then you're getting maybe not even maybe not even increasing anymore, kind of stabilizes, and then once you retire, obviously you're living on fixed income, and it begins to decline. The most widely used measure of income inequality is something called the Lorenz curve, which provides a graphical representation of the distribution of income among members of a population or households. There's a 45-degree reference line. It's a picture of it on the next slide, I think it is, of all members of the population. What that 45-degree reference line represents is equal incomes among all members. If income were distributed perfectly equally, the Lorenz curve would be a straight diagonal line. That is called the line of income inequality. So let me show it to you there. Here's a picture of it. I think this one's in your book. This 45-degree reference, or 45-degree line says this is equal distribution. All households, here's one way to read it. So let's look at the 80%. Up to here. That dot, this dot, this one, and this one, you connected them all, they're all on that line. And what it says is that 20% of the households earn 20% of income, of all cumulative income. 20, this is a cumulative percent. 40% of all households earn 40% of all income. 60% of households earn 60%. It's a line of equality. But in reality, our income equality is not equal. And so they did these two measures from 1980 to to 2009 and shows that it's, or was it 2008? It's like 2008. That the curve is bowed out downward from that line of equality. The further it's bowed out, for instance, this one here, the darker reddish one, this bowed out further, the more unequal our distribution of income is. So if you take the points on the line, let's just use these 2 points. 60%, this is in 2000, this is 2008 first, or 80. 1980, 60% of all households earned about, just average, maybe 32% of all income. In 2009, 60% of all households earned about, it's probably under 30%, 27% of all income. So it's dropped, the income distribution. It's been reduced. They did take point A there. Point A shows that in 1980, the bottom 80% of households received 56% of all income. This point here. Point B shows that in 2008, the share of all income going to the bottom 80%, I don't like the word bottom, but 80%. 80% of households was lower in 1980 than 1980. So points representing 20% of all households receive 20% of total income, and so on. The further the curve bows away from the line of equality, the greater the inequality is. Okay. So you'll have a couple of questions on the test. As a matter of fact, I do have a graph picture of one. I think there's 2 curves that bow out. So, but the bowed curve is the Lorenz curve. The further it is away, the more unequal it is. What causes income inequality? Well, some of these reasons are things that maybe we talked about back under the wage discrimination, or what, not wage discrimination, wage differences, determination, the ability of a person to earn more, so their incomes are higher or lower depending on their ability. Maybe their education, maybe they, again, human capital. How much more time do you spend going to school? Sometimes discrimination occurs. We talked about economics of discrimination back in a previous set of notes. Preferences and risk, wealth distribution. Some people are kind of born into wealth, or at least have accumulated some wealth, maybe selling real estate back in the mid-2000s, and did very well for themselves. The number of households working, or just plain old experience, could also play a part of why incomes are so unequal. And causes, these are different causes of growing inequality. It does grow over time. Since the 1970s, we've seen it started to rise again. Since that decade of the 60s when Lyndon Johnson was trying to fight the war of poverty. Causes of growing income inequality, greater demand for highly skilled workers, demographic changes, international trade, immigration, and decline in unionism. So let's talk about poverty. I mentioned that word a few times. It's the percentage of the population that is poor according to the federal government's definition. That percent of the population living below the poverty threshold. The level, this is what the definition of the poverty line is, the level of annual income equal to 3 times the amount of money necessary to purchase the minimal quantity of food required for adequate nutrition. That is actually the definition, almost word for word, if you go online and look it up. Poverty rates in groups in 2005, all people, it was 12.6%. That's how many people live under the threshold, 12.6% of the people. In 2005, I don't know what that threshold was. I think I do have some more current numbers for the poverty threshold. Different ethnic groups here having higher percentages and obviously lower. The poverty rate in the United States since 1959 up to 2009, it was very high. Over 20-something% of the people lived in poverty in 1959. and it started to drop dramatically. We spent millions of dollars, the federal government, for welfare, different programs, to help the needy during that decade. It started to level off, and it's, fluctuated a little bit, but still hovers around the 15% mark today. I think it was said, 2005 was 12.6%. This is in 2009, people living in poverty. This is the actual threshold line. One person, if you didn't make $10,830, you were living in poverty, according to the government's threshold. A family of 4, 22,050. Okay, and those numbers are not, I think, on the Census Bureau. The more current ones probably should get a little bit more current data. But you get the idea that the threshold changes a little bit every year. Poverty trends between 1959 and 69, it fell because we spent a lot of money of that downward drop in poverty. It was stable in the 70s, again rose in the early 80s. We had a recession in the early 80s. Typically recessions show more poverty levels. Up and down in the late 1990s and 2000, and again rose with a recession of 2001 through 2004. Primary characteristics of those who fall below the poverty line is lack of a job, period. So that's the primary reason. Another cause could be the place of residence, geographic. It affects people's ability to earn income. Poverty is self-perpetuating sometimes. Children of the poor have a disadvantage. You tend to live in that environment and it kind of follows you. So that's why I said geographic. Sometimes there may be a poor family in the state of Mississippi, which is the lowest state per capita in the United States. And it's hard to get out of that rut, that self-perpetuating time of being in poverty. Yes, certain people will, but it typically requires education. You leaving the area, getting an education, and bettering yourself to get out of that rut, to get out of that self-perpetuating idea. The lack of an education is another one, just in general. Those that have less education typically earn less. Poverty does not affect all racial and age groups equally, as we saw on that previous slide, and lack of proficiency in English. That could affect your ability to earn. And just bad luck. Those are some causes of poverty. Here are some poverty rates by age up to 2010. During this little, I think this was in your book, these little horizontal bars are recessions. These are recessions. So you can see what happens during recessions. Those that like are under 18, that goes up. This is older than 65. Actually, this was in the 60s. Everything started to fall because we were throwing money at it. The government was throwing money at it to help poverty. And it kind of stabilized, but you can see just increases in general during recessions. All these things are kind of going up just a little bit during recessions. The senior citizens seem to go down, but it's more stabilized here. So 20.7% are the people under 18. People under 18 are typically going to be the first ones to go as far as jobs. When you have to lay people off. The younger workers tend to go first. Here's by states. I believe this one was in your book. Percent of the population living in poverty by state. 13.6% in Florida. Mississippi, 21.4%. What's the worst? The South, isn't it? Generally, the darker numbers, the darker color red is the higher percentages than the North. White ones are really lower than 11.4% of the population. Florida's kind of, I guess, in the middle of the road there. We're one of the few states in the South that are kind of in the middle. Alabama also, Florida, Georgia is fairly high. The consequences of poverty, lack of access to health care, although the Affordable Care Act has changed that a little bit. Lack of access to affordable housing. Children raised in severe poverty tend to suffer from lifelong learning disabilities. Again, these are statistical proof, data, research. I don't care too much about this bottom here. 8th graders finishing college. Anti-poverty programs. The means-tested programs are programs available only to individuals or families with income fall below a certain level. Here's the definition of that in-kind benefits. Programs sometimes offer those in-kind benefits, which are benefits in the form of goods and services rather than money. A negative income tax is a program that supplements the income of low-income working families. And here are some examples of welfare state programs in 2009. These are means-tested, non-means tested. Again, means-tested means it's for people who fall below a certain level. And you might kind of heard of these before. Temporary assistance for the needy families. We spend $20.1 billion in the United States. In-kind transfers might be food stamps, $54 billion. Supplemental security income, 42.4. Medicaid is for the needy, not Medicare. Medicare is for the elderly. In-kind, again, those that qualify. Non-means tested Social Security benefits, $664 billion for the people who are retirement age, qualify. Same thing with Medicare, $500 billion. That's a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money we're spending. This is in 2009. These are the programs we call welfare state programs the government spends money on. Where does the money come from? Tax dollars. So are they, my only, I guess, opposition to some of this is the fraud that occurs. People receiving those aids and assistance, and they're defrauding the government. And I think there was a thing I told you about. 2020 had it just reminded me, I got an income link. I'll show it on Wednesday. Let me see if I can find it. No, I'll bring it in Wednesday. I think that'll be the easiest. All right, so let me stop there because the next little clip is a clip, and we just got 4 slides, and we'll finish it up on Wednesday and then talk about the test, the final exam on Wednesday also.